Welcome to Blueprints for Liberty, Designing the Freedom Cities of Tomorrow. This is a podcast that explores the visionary concept of freedom cities and how we can create living environments that prioritize individual liberty, social harmony, and equal opportunities for all. We look back through history to see how the past informs the future and how people can self-organize in their communities to support self-sufficiency. We also look to develop leaders that are moral and ethical in a world that is spinning out of control. Tune in to be part of the conversation shaping the future of our communities.
Hello and welcome, everybody. It's a little bit past the holidays. We're all getting back into the swing of things, and I'm really excited to talk to Aaron Makelky today. And he's from Wyoming. We share that in common, so it's not often you find two people from Wyoming. So it's always exciting. I'm always excited because I don't live there anymore when I get to talk to somebody from my home state. So anyway, I'll let him introduce himself and what he does, and then we'll jump in.
Hi, Cheryl. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm in Casper, Wyoming. I've lived in Wyoming for 12 years now, I believe. The big number is once you hit 10, you can get that lifetime hunting and fishing license, and then that's how they keep you from ever leaving Wyoming once you get that. At least that's what I told my wife. But thank you for having me on. I'm a high school teacher, a coach, an entrepreneur. I do a little work around AI outside of school and some strategy and consulting with that. And I've connected with you the last 2 months now and your podcast and how you combine education, the Constitution, sort of a futuristic view of work and success and education, which I really love. And it's forced me to look at some things differently in my own classroom.
Oh, well, that's, I guess, kind of good. Um, we'll start. I wrote a book. I've mentioned it on other previous podcasts. It's called The Ambition Quotient. And just a little history where the book came from was in about 2010. I was doing a lot of corporate training. So he comes from the, K through 12 side of thing, and I come from the corporate, which there is overlap, but there's also some distinct differences. I think my biggest takeaway is, he's training up the generations that I get to then in turn deal with when they come into the workspace. So, and I don't mean it in a bad way by any means, but I do know that our school systems, and to be fair, let me go back a little bit, and he can agree or disagree with me here, but when we first started our public school systems in the United States, one-room schools, you came during the winter, not the off season because you worked on the farm or whatever during the year. And so, it worked out kind of well. But then when we moved into the industrial age and we needed people to work more on the assembly line, that required a different type of education, and it also took people off the farm a little bit more and moved them into that space. So we have kids going to school still on this farm schedule, which I've never quite figured out why we haven't adjusted to that. But hey, if I were a teacher, I would want the summers off too. But I'm sure it's not all it's cracked up to be. But anyway, I think our schools did a really good job of preparing kids for that assembly line type work and to go into get a job, stay there your whole life, build up a retirement and, work your way up the ladder of success. And a lot of people did that. And I think there was a lot of value to that. I remember when my husband very first went to work at Micron. No, that was, I don't know, a long time ago, probably early 2000s. And he had that mindset. He was like, I'm going to go work for Micron. I'm going to retire from Micron. And he loved it because there was a lot he could learn, and they were constantly giving him all kinds of opportunities to take classes and learn. But then Micron decided they were going to do what a lot of companies nowadays do, and they started outsourcing a lot of their IT to, overseas. And thus he ended up, it worked out well. They gave him a good payout and kept him around long enough to train hit the people that were going to replace him. And, he went on to do some really great stuff. But I think that was his first real exposure to, oh, I'm not going to be at this job for the rest of my life. And I think I don't know exactly what mindset a lot of our youth come into the workplace with nowadays, but I do know that in about 2010, I was doing a lot of research for it used to be ASTD, it's ATD, American Training and Development Association. And it was interesting because I was identifying just from my own anecdotal type information that creativity, problem solving, team building, communication, and resilience were the five characteristics that they weren't coming to the table with when they came into the workplace. And oddly enough, in a couple of years, I saw that ASTD at the time was their research showed the exact same thing that I had come across anecdotally. So I thought that was really interesting, and it really made me focus in on, why are these skills lacking and how are they different than like IQ, or EQ, if you're really smart and you've got pretty good emotional intelligence in terms of, and communication, there's a little bit of overlap with AQ and EQ. But if you have those, why isn't that you're not succeeding in the workplace? So I'll let you jump in there and see what your thoughts are.
Well, let's just take one of those that you found and that company found employees lacked and say teamwork or cooperation. Inside public education, I always describe public ed as a snow globe, and it's sort of this self-contained unit that acts like and kind of is insulated from the quote unquote real world because we don't have to keep up with things and compete like companies do or employers do. We sort of set our own rules and then get to try to meet those. So I mean that as in it's kind of an artificial environment like a snow globe. If you ask teachers what's the best way to assess learning, they all say you can't do anything in groups ever. You should never assess learning cooperatively, or any group work is practice and then there's an individual component. But what's funny is I've yet to meet anyone outside of public ed who doesn't work with a team, even if it's clients. It's not necessarily colleagues physically next to you in the office, but you have a project manager or somebody that does the marketing and you do the sales, like everything outside of school you do in a team. Yet people within school say you shouldn't assess and do anything important in a team because that's not the best way to tell what someone knows. And so it's a question of, okay, well, which one's right? They're both right in that environment, but which one should adapt to fit the other? I think that's, which one's going to wag the tail, I guess would be the saying. And I kind of have feet in both worlds now and have gotten more of a taste outside of public ed. And I do think there has to be a way to teach teamwork, to teach resilience, to teach emotional intelligence. I mean, when does anyone learn that in K-12 public ed? I haven't seen it, and I've been in that system my whole life since I was 5 years old.
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting, just kind of another piece of anecdotal information that lends itself to this conversation. When I was doing a lot of this research of my own, I had kids in high school and a couple that were in college at the time. So I was like, I'll just go talk to all their friends. This is my informal way of doing research. And they were all good students. And so I asked them, I said, you tell me what you think it is that makes, why do you get straight A's? What makes you successful in the school environment? And I expected them to say things like, oh, I do my homework and I study hard and I, go the extra mile and, do extra homework or whatever. But across the board, that wasn't even close to the answer I got overwhelmingly was I learned to give the teacher what they wanted.
What did the factory system, when we set up public schools, what values did we say we're instilling? And if you ask me, as a teacher, but also a historian, it's number one, compliance, and it's
Mhm,
number two, conformity.
mhm,
Do what the teacher says. In other words, parrot back the right answer or, copy down the equation and be able to give it back to them, regurgitate it really.
Mhm.
But then it's in the environment of you sit in a row. A lot of people who say schools aren't segregated anymore. Yes, they are. They're segregated by age.
Mhm.
Well, are all 16-year-olds ready for the same math or English based on their biological age? No way. That's in a lot of ways, it's a terrible system. Why do we keep it that way? Because we value conformity.
Yes.
So I think it's conformity and compliance. That doesn't mean that's all you learn in school, but those are the hierarchy, top level values. I don't know what your perspective on public ed is from the outside, but that's mine from within it.
Well, and it's interesting because I started, well, I've always been somewhat of a maverick. I started being an entrepreneur in the early 1990s, and then I went back to college, and very frustrating. It's very frustrating when you've got so much experience in the field you're going into that you could teach the classes that you're paying somebody to, and it's like that was my first like, okay, this something's got to change here, but I don't, say I have all the answers to know how to fix everything. But I also learned that conformity and compliance in the workplace were that was highly valued because I came to the workplace and I had all these in my idea. I was like, oh, I have all these wonderful ideas and I'm going to transform the world. And, I'm just like, oh, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I'm ready to go. And I get there and they're like, no, no, no. That we've tried that. That doesn't work, and even if they hadn't tried it, we can't take any risks and all of this kind of thing. And so I felt like all those years that I put in corporate America, I was getting beat down and discouraged. They didn't want my creativity. They didn't want me to, come up with all these wonderful ideas to solve problems that, they didn't even see were happening sometimes. And so I kind of sat back and I thought, okay, well, the school doesn't necessarily promote creativity because they want you just to, regurgitate back these answers. You get into the workplace and they don't really want it. But we are on the precipice, and I know because you're in AI and I'm in AI, and I've seen this shift since about probably 2016, 2017. But since ChatGPT came out, it's kind of like, okay, it's real now. We can't just talk about this stuff anymore. This is real. And when people come into the workforce, they come in with a certain skill set, and if they're not prepared to adapt and learn and grow and use this ambition quotient that I've talked about a little bit, they're just not going to make it because companies aren't going to survive if they themselves don't adapt and have people that are creative. But they also have to have a way of communicating their creative ideas. And I will admit, especially early on, I didn't always communicate my ideas in the most effective way. And so, you know, I think schools need to learn how to teach the kids to be creative and to be able to adapt, but they also need to teach them how to communicate their ideas in a way that people want to listen to them, I guess.
And what's the default format that schools do that, at least at the higher end, middle school on up through college? It's writing papers. And I
Mm.
had this conversation with a student recently, and they asked me, they said, how hard would you try on a web page or a blog post or a LinkedIn article if you knew you were only going to have one person look at it? And I thought for a second, and I was like, well, not very hard because it wouldn't matter. And he said, yeah, that's us with every essay. You're the one viewer. And I thought that was a great insight from the student. And that doesn't mean writing doesn't matter anymore. However, writing for an audience of one that is your history or your English professor or teacher is a very outdated model. One, because, well, what do I know that lots of other people don't? And two, when are you ever going to write something for one person? That just engenders the idea of tell the teacher what he or she wants to hear, get the grade, move on with life, go down the conveyor belt. The the trouble with that is one, so how do you teach creativity? Like I hear this all the time. Well, we're evaluated based on the standardized test that the state makes us take, or shout out to Wyoming. We're smart in that we don't make up our own test. Our high school students take the ACT and we use that for accountability that, the government wants and some of those reports are based on, but then it also is a national test that helps our students. It's the only test they take in high school that actually helps themselves. that doesn't measure emotional IQ or resilience or teamwork or creativity. So, do we need a different way to measure intelligence and evaluate schools? Should we get rid of those tests? Should we adapt them? I mean, that's the big question because I think we all know the industrialized factory model from the 1880s has barely changed. I mean, we still have bells telling us when to move to the next place on the conveyor belt, right? That's
Mhm.
history class to math class, just like a factory has the bell or the whistle. So, how do we change the system to create space for that or change what we assess and teach to include things like creativity?
Well, I it's tricky, and I will admit, I did a long-term sub job when I was, going through college, and a woman went out on maternity leave, so I was pretty much the teacher for the whole year. And I did let kids work in teams, and I did let kids work in that environment. And a lot of that, I will admit, was because I was out in a trailer that wasn't in the building and I didn't attend all the teacher meetings. I kind of got to do what I wanted to do, you know? So it was like, okay. But I found that the challenges that I was facing in the classroom were the same challenges that I was seeing in the workplace. And so seeing how they were addressed in the workplace when it comes to working in teams, there's no doubt, being an instructional designer that I am, there is a very creative side of things. We have systems that we follow, but we also have aspects of, that require a lot of creativity. So whenever we sit down and we're going to build a curriculum, and we all sit down and we brainstorm and we come up with all these ideas, and then there's one person who's responsible for kind of taking notes and then transcribing those notes, and then there's other people. It goes through different team members for feedback and ideas and things like that. But what was happening in the classroom was the same thing that was happening. You find that the same people have a tendency to do all the work. And then there's those that kind of go, oh, well, if you're going to do all the work, that means I don't have to do any of the work, right? And so what I did in the classroom was I made sure that every person on the team had a different assignment, and they were each responsible for their own, like there was a project manager. And just using an example as an instructional designer, okay, I have a project manager, but I also have an instructional designer. But part of creating learning is visual. So I need somebody who's got some visual art skills, and I've got some people who are really good technical writers and editors, and I'm not a great technical writer and an editor. So each of us had our responsibilities, and that's what I tried to do in the classroom, was mimic that same kind of thing where everybody had their own responsibility and it was totally different. So if the visual piece fell down, it was really obvious who didn't do their work. If the technical writing side of it fell down, it was obvious who didn't do their work. But yet everybody had to participate, and everybody got to provide feedback on what other people were doing. And when I was working at the University of California right before COVID, and I was managing 5 student interns, one of the things I found most interesting was I kind of set this up. We were doing a UX UI design thing, and I'm not a UX UI design person, so I wasn't a subject matter expert. So I was kind of learning alongside of them, which was a lot of fun because trust me, they knew a whole lot more than I did. But the things that they didn't know is how to turn something in, like you were talking about, like, oh, I turn it into one person. Well, that was their idea. I gave them all their assignments, they came back, put it together, gave it to me, and I gave them my feedback, and they're like, oh, good, let's move on to the next project. I'm like, oh, no, 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 that's not how this works. You
Yes.
only got my feedback. Now we have to go through 3 or 4 different people, and they're going to provide their feedback. And they were like, oh. And each time they got feedback, they're like, oh, we have to go back and redo this. Oh, and we have to go back and redo it again. And oh, we have to go back and redo it again. But then it was like, okay, why am I redoing this each time I get somebody else's input? Don't I have any say in whether I like this input or not? I'm like, okay, so that goes back to your communication skills. How well are you going to be able to push back and communicate and say, hey, can I challenge your feedback and say, this is why we did it this way. Does it make sense to you? And, and to kind of work through those things. And that was really hard for them to do as an 18, 19-year-old in a world full of adults. They're not used to pushing back on adults. But so I helped them put together a communication plan so that they could learn how to communicate effectively with adults and in a way that was respectful, but yet still kind of got their point across. And so I found that to be a really helpful way of doing it. I could sit here for an hour and tell you all the drawbacks, to that also. But, on a high level, that seemed to work pretty well.
Yeah. And what do you do when you get conflicting feedback from two adults? Because in school, I don't know if you ever get that. Maybe on a sports team, you might have two different coaches tell you, fix your stance this way versus fix your stance that way. But you don't have two different English teachers giving you feedback on how to write an introduction or two different physics instructors telling you which equation to use. That person knows I do it their way. And if I don't, they tell me why I'm wrong and I fix it. If you even turn in a second draft, which you usually don't. Yeah. And to your question on the teamwork, here's a question for you that connects that idea to some of the AI stuff that you and I love to think about and, not prediction's the wrong word, but just kind of ideate about. One of the things that I've done this semester as an experiment is nothing is a solo assignment or project anymore. Even if you're the only human student doing it, you have AI tools, sometimes one that I build for you, sometimes just learning how to prompt a generic one and use that for feedback and ideas and brainstorming. And one of the things that I've seen is that I don't think students really do solo assignments anymore unless you go paper, pencil, and turn off the Wi-Fi. And I don't know that they should, because why wouldn't you want, say, an expert UX UI person sit in the room and give you feedback as you build this course out? And you're like, well, I'm all about pedagogy and curriculum and sequencing and assessment. I didn't think of where to put the back button and what color it should be. And if you had a UI, UX human in the room say, like, make it purple and put it there, trust me, it's better for this reason, you'd go, wow, that would be really valuable. Well, now we have that, especially if you know how to use those tools or how to prompt them. And I don't see our students, let's say high school students right now that are going to be hitting the workforce in the next 1 to 5 years as doing any of their jobs on their own. Even if they're by themselves or an entrepreneur, they're going to have a team of digital coworkers or employees, don't you think?
Well, I'm part of a mastermind and it's called The Collective and it's all about AI. And they'll say, their big thing is we're a bunch of entrepreneurs and how can I start a business totally by myself? Because I don't want to hire employees. Especially, as an entrepreneur, the startup costs, the start amount of work that's involved is just enormous. Let's go back 20 years before even, when computers were really getting mainstreamed. I know we had them before that, but that's when they were really, really kind of taking over. Oh, wow. It's 2025. Okay, let's go back 30 years. I'm like, wow. That's what happens when you get old, is you just time flies. But I'm just thinking that we, you know, if I wanted to start a business, I remember I took a class long time ago when I first started my first business, and it was from US West. That's how old I was. And it was in Wyoming at Western Wyoming College, and they were teaching how to write a business plan. And so I said, like, okay, cool. I need to write a business plan. Okay, not only do I need to write this business plan, but I have to have a marketing plan. I have to have a budget. I have to have, all these elements. So I had to be the marketing expert. I had to be the accountant. I had to be all these things. And that was okay for just putting together a standard business plan. But if I wanted to actually take it to a bank and get funding, I needed to go get other people involved that
Yep.
really knew how to do that. And then when you bring other people in, you of course have to pay other people because other people don't want to work for free. And the more people you get involved in your project, all of a sudden, that's what I found is I'm like, oh, all of a sudden my vision is no longer my vision. Now it needs to be our vision. And if it's going to be our vision and people want to be part of this project, they need to feel like they have ownership in it. So I can't just say, well, this is my idea and I want to do everything my way. And that's, team building and communication and all that kind of thing. So there's just so many things that you do as an entrepreneur that involves so many people getting a business off the ground. Well, this whole purpose behind this collective is teaching one person using AI how to start a business by yourself.
Yep.
Because
And
AI is your accounting person. AI can build your website now. AI can build, your marketing plan. AI can build your business plan. AI can do it all.
and you don't have to be the expert at marketing. You have to know enough about it to give it instructions on, let's say, the type of marketing you want to do, or what your budget is, or what mediums you're going to do it through. Let's say Facebook ads versus, the yellow pages. Yeah, I agree. And isn't the CEO of OpenAI has said there's this running bet on who's going to be the first one person billion-dollar business because AI makes that now possible. Just with the hours in the day, you couldn't do that. Even if you knew all of the content and you really were the tax expert and the marketing expert and the business strategy expert and the product expert, which no one is, but you wouldn't have enough hours in the day for one person to do that. You don't have enough leverage until you figure out, well, what if I had an AI agent or custom GPT? There's different versions of the same thing, but have one built for that purpose that I prompt or set up automations for. And now it's kind of like having an employee work for me in my browser or while I sleep.
I like the one while I sleep. It's my favorite.
Yep.
Okay.
And
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, did you see the study where the researchers at Carnegie Mellon and Duke set up a business of all AI agents?
No.
So I just shared this with my students. You can put a link in the show notes or however you do
Yeah.
that, but the name of the study is The Agent Company: Benchmarking LLM Agents and Consequential Real-World Tasks. Two things that I think were really important from this. They set up a business that had no human employees. So, as far as I know, that's the first time that's been done. And it was, a fake one, but I think that's the future. There might be the one entrepreneur who files for the LLC, but then all the employees are just AI tools.
Mhm.
They went back and evaluated all these tasks. They had like a marketing person and a business person and a writer. 24% of the tasks were completed correctly and autonomously with no human involvement. So it wasn't super successful. But what I thought was the really interesting part, and I shared this with my students in class today, they found four key areas that the AI agents lacked. And I want to know your experience with the corporate people and the college students, if there's any overlap with human areas of weakness. They said the AI agents, one, lacked common sense. Two, this is funny because all the other employees were AI, but they lacked social skills.
Mhm.
Three, they lacked the ability to browse the internet. So they didn't know how to do basic browsing tasks. And then the last one, self-deceptive. And their example, people go, how can an AI be self-deceptive? One of the AI agents was supposed to have a conversation in a chat room with the other AI agent, and it couldn't find it. So instead, it renamed a different agent, the one it was supposed to talk to, and then had a conversation with the renamed one and said, look, I talked to that person.
Pretty
And
cool.
yeah, so I'll tell you what I think and what my students say, but is there any overlap between common sense, social skills, basic internet browsing, and self-deception in the human workforce or college interns that you've seen?
Oh, definitely. I mean, they're across the board, I would say that that's pretty accurate. The only thing that I would say is, browsing the internet. And this is interesting. And I remember also trying to teach students how to browse the internet because they know how to go do a Google search, which we don't do anymore. We do Chat GPT searches. So, hey, and I like Perplexity. That's my favorite browsing tool. But
Same.
yeah, so even though I would say they're very good at internet browsing, they're very good at the basics. And the reason I also say this is because I'm not really good at it, but the reason I can say this with a little authority is because my husband is incredibly good at it. And he knows all of those the syntax to use to get the right types of results. Like I'll go do a Google search and for something and I'll come back with these results and he's like, in 30 seconds or less, he's got far more accurate results and the types of things. My daughter's really good at it. A lot of times if I can't find something, I'm like, oh, just go to my daughter. She'll look it up and she'll find, and she does, and she finds all these things that I was looking for, but I couldn't find because I didn't understand the syntax. So this is definitely AI definitely has the same problem, but and this is giving AI more human qualities than I think it currently has. Okay. But to me, in my experience, especially being part of this collective, is the best advice I ever got for using an AI tool was treat it like a human. Because we still treat it like a machine and we give it very basic requests, we get very basic answers. And we don't know how to give it the complexity. And I've gotten much better at giving it, more complexity. Like, oh, I do a lot of writing with it, which is the standard easiest thing you could possibly do with AI, and especially large language models, because that's definitely what they're kind of really good at. But instead of just saying, I'll just say, rewrite this for me or rewrite it for clarity and grammar. Well, I end up having to do it 3, 4, 5 times because yeah, I want clarity. Yeah, I want grammar. Then I want it to be more concise. Then I want it in an 8th grade language, or a 5th grade and then I want you to be a little more creative over here. I want you to add a little bit of pizzazz over here, kind of things and build out this idea a little bit more. So that's what large language models are. They're only as good as the training you give them. And if we don't teach AI to have more common sense, but we do it by teaching it just like we would teach a person to do it. When we talk to AI like we talk to a person or we give it tasks, if I want my 5-year-old to have more common sense, what kind of tasks am I going to give them? Like simple example. I bought, in all my brilliance, I have grandkids. I bought a ceramic tea set for them to have tea parties. I don't have any carpet in my house, hardly at all. Everything is either hardwood floors or tile, ceramic tile. So can you imagine how many times that tea set has been broken?
Yeah.
Exactly. So I ask my grandkids, they're 5, 6, 7, right in that range, what kind of things can we do to make sure that, every time you drop something, it doesn't break because they're going to drop it. That's just, and so they come up with ideas and solutions and, okay, well, let's go get, that rug that's over by the front door that's kind of soft. We'll put that underneath us when we have a tea party, you know, and getting them to think through things like that. Okay, well, you can, believe it or not, you can do that with AI. If you're finding that it's coming up with these really ridiculous responses that don't have any common sense, then you have to go back and talk to it like a 5-year-old and say, okay, you didn't come up with the right, not necessarily the right answer, but you didn't come up with something, and you need to use the words common sense. That wasn't a common sense, and then define what common sense is. So
Yes.
that's what I think.
And I'll tell you this, it sounds weird, but using AI so much in the last 2 years
Mhm.
has made me so much better at giving instructions to my students,
Mhm.
my colleagues, my children at home. So you have your grandkid teapot example. Here's my son. 2 days ago, we're shoveling snow in Wyoming. It snows a lot. And we did our driveway, we did the one neighbor, widow lady.
Mhm.
And I said, now do the sidewalk just on the outside towards the street up until this next neighbor. He did exactly what I told him to do, how I told him to do it. And then he put his shovel away and went inside. I never said, and then check with me on what's next, or and then do this. He wasn't wrong. I gave poor and incomplete instructions. Exactly like AI, it's not going to do anything you didn't ask it to do.
Mhm.
It doesn't wake you up in the morning and say, "Can I make you a coffee?" It only responds to what you prompt it to do, like, "Give me a recipe to make my coffee." And it's so funny because I now spend a pretty large amount of my time prompting AI side by side with other humans. And that skill has made me so much better at giving prompts to humans because I see, wow, I didn't ask it, "Do you understand? Read it back to me. What's unclear right now? What else do you want to know to be able to do this task well? How do I evaluate it?" And the framework that I teach my students and clients and businesses that I work with is very similar to what you talked about. Talk to it like a human. I use talk to it like an overly eager intern that doesn't sleep and read every textbook on every subject ever published and every blog. But like an intern, they never want to tell you you're wrong. They
Mhm.
never want to act like, "Oh, I don't actually know how to do that." They'll just make it up or make it sound convoluted enough that you think it's right. And they never do anything extra. Like the intern doesn't come in and sweep the floor unless you put it on his list of duties. So you have to treat the AI tool like that overly eager intern, or in the teacher world, it's the overly eager student teacher. They work for free, they never sleep. One of the unique advantages to using AI for tasks is it doesn't get offended when you give it critical feedback.
Yes.
Students or coworkers or even bosses can get defensive and their ego gets in the way or they have an emotional response. I've never had an AI say, "You hurt my feelings. I won't do that for you anymore," or "I quit because you were too hard on me when you gave me feedback."
This is so true. And there's two things here. So let's circle back to what we talked about at the beginning. And everybody thinks, I remember when the internet first came out, oh, it's going to replace, when computers came out, it's going to replace all these people, and people aren't going to have jobs anymore. Oh, when the internet came out, it's going to replace everybody. We're not going to have jobs anymore. And now AI, oh, we're not going to have jobs. Okay, everything we've just talked about, if you're going to use AI effectively, you need to be creative. You can make it a team member, but you still need to learn to work how to work as a team, even with AI, and you need to communicate effectively, and you have to be resilient, and you have to teach it how to problem solve. It doesn't naturally know how to problem solve. You need to teach it how to problem solve. And you do that by just simply giving it, now, if you go onto Khan Academy and things like that, a lot of your, academic AIs have a lot of that built in already. So when you're choosing to use that type of model in your own work that you're doing, just mimic what you see Khan Academy or some of these other AIs do. Because, if you're not a problem solving expert and you don't know how to walk somebody through like the T set, how do I problem solve this? T set breaks every time. What kind of things do you need to think about to make this happen? And so do I think AI is going to replace everybody? Yeah, it's going to replace people. There's no doubt. Just like computers replace people, just like the internet replaced people to some degree. But the people who learn to use it effectively are going to stay employed, and they're going to stay employed for a lot longer. And coming back to what you said at the very end, what was it? Because my mind is,
In terms of
oh,
not
yeah,
getting
yeah,
the
feedback.
feedback, they don't get
Yes.
emotional or quit or
Yes. Perfect example. I've I'm working with the speakers lab to learn, how to be a better speaker and that kind of thing, right? And so I'm putting together an abstract, and it's a marketing tool to help me get, more gigs in terms of speaking. Well, I'm not a marketing expert. Not only am I not a marketing expert, I don't care how hard I communicate with AI. AI can't even make me a marketing expert. So I'm a hopeless cause. But, you know, once again, and that's what he's here for. He's my coach, right? He's supposed to be helping me. So I give him my abstract. He gives me feedback, and he tells me, go use Chat GPT. Like, okay, I know how to I am using Chat GPT. I'm obviously not using it right because I'm not getting, what he wants. And I get feedback and I kind of get my feelings hurt. And I'm like, "Ugh, I don't want to do this anymore." you know, and that's that resilience part of things where I think we need to do we do need to teach kids how to be resilient, because AI isn't going to, be like a typical person when they get negative feedback. It is going to be very accommodating of you, but that's not the real world. And just like I am using AI to turn in this abstract and to work with my coach to get to the end result, I'm still not giving him what he's looking for. And so I still need to learn to be resilient and take feedback and incorporate it and not get my feelings hurt and realize that really he's only there to help me, accomplish my own goals here. So I need to make sure that you know, these skills are still, I think they're even more relevant. These AQ skills are more relevant now than they ever were before.
Yeah, and here's my idea. I'm not going to call it a theory, but when AI can remove friction around a lot of tasks, in your example, the entrepreneur can have basically a team of AI tools that do things you couldn't do on your own nearly as well, or as fast, or as cheap. I see the same thing with students. Once they see ChatGPT can write that essay or answer the questions on that quiz, one of the first questions they ask is, so what do I really have to do, or what's left for me? And inevitably, I think one of the results will be a lack of ambition to want to do things, because people kind of shrug and go, well, the thing I would have had to go to college for and study and read books, AI is already better than me at it and faster and cheaper. So what am I going to do? What's worth doing anymore? What's worth struggling at? And the opposite will happen. So the entrepreneurs in your mastermind take the same technology and say, wow, that removes all these barriers to what I was limited by 5 years ago. Now I can start a business and have a team and get all this done using technology. And my ambition is, increasing exponentially. At the same time, somebody's going, it's futile. Why do it? The AI is just going to automate me out of the job, or my degree is now worthless. So I'm curious to see how that plays out, and what your thoughts are on the correlation between AI tools being available and the ambition quotient.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head without even recognizing it. Is if all you're going to do is take AI and use it for standard things that everybody uses it for, and just like me, when I first got it, it's like, oh, great. Now I don't, because I write a lot. I have tons of writing that I have to do. And it just saved me all that work with all this writing. But the problem yeah, I could probably pass a 12th grade English essay, you know, but in the real world, if I'm writing and I'm writing from a marketing perspective, I'm not getting it. Even though AI is doing it and I'm telling it, I want this to be, from this angle in the marketing, and this is my audience, and this is how I want you to talk to them and everything. I'll come back and I'll give it to somebody who really is a marketing expert, and they go, no, that's not quite it, you know? And so I have to go back and do some more. And so I think that resilience is important once again. But I also think that what you said is important, in that instead of looking at what AI can do out of the box for you, all of a sudden you've got all these students, and I'm not even sure how you do this, because you have to kind of do it from the time they're younger. I think it's our brains aren't quite as malleable, even when they graduate from high school, is teach kids to all of a sudden dream again. And I see that this is really sad, but it's really true. My 4-year-old granddaughter came out to visit me this summer, and she was just all over the place, into everything, just having a blast. We live on 8 acres. She lived outside. She wanted to play with the dog all day long. She had this, we have a little bird bath, and she sat there for almost 2 hours playing in this bird bath, making lunch. Yeah. And, she had all these leaves and all these berries, and she's very artistic. Her mother's incredibly artistic, very talented. And she would make us these plates of food and, things, and plate it just perfectly. And it looked really nice. And I was like, wow, you're really creative. This is like, ah. And then a week or two later, or prior to that, I should say, my 7-year-old grandson came out. and he's in first grade. And he used to be that way. And all of a sudden he's like surly and, I don't want to do anything. And no, I don't want to go outside. And he used to love to go outside and watch the stars with grandpa and, go on nature hikes and pick up rocks and all those things. And he's just like, nah, 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 nah. And I'm like, what happened? And then it dawned on me. He went to school.
Yeah, kindergarten, first grade.
I know. So we need to bring that ambition comes from dreaming. It comes from like, wow, instead of saying, oh, look what AI can, does, what can it do? What possibility? And the cool thing is I can make it do it. If I'm willing to take the time and learn, I can make it do it.
And the limit now for the first time in human history is actually our own
Mhm.
creativity, human imagination. It's not the tool like bronze or steel or the amount of electricity available. It's what can you think of to use this for, or what can you tell it to try to build? Yeah, I see that with my students. So a unique thing in my syllabus is I put on any assessment that you come to me prior to the deadline and propose a different format. I will always say yes if you have a serious proposal. So I've had students, could I paint a portrait of this famous person instead of write an essay? Could I build a board game that incorporates the content instead of do a slideshow? Very few students take me up on that because they just do what they know, like a slide deck or a paper. I was gone and had a sub cover when my students did an assignment on the Black Death. And a girl, I was so proud of her. She goes, well, I didn't ask you because you were gone, but I made a fortune teller where you fold the thing and pick a number and then put all the cures and preventions for the 14th century science of the Black Plague inside. And so she built this elaborate thing that had all the good content that you needed that would be on a slide deck or in a paper, but she did it in that format. And I was like, yes, that's exactly the kind of thing we should do. I don't know how much she used AI, but that's just the mindset that I think young people need to have is there's always a different, maybe better, maybe not, but a different way that I could do this. And your imagination is the governor now more than the tools are.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And this was probably 10 years ago. Um, I put together a training for Alcoa. And this is before AI. So I think not everything has to be, directly related to AI. But what they did was they were finding that their employees had a lot of really good ideas. And so they put up a suggestion box. People throw the box, something in the suggestion box. Managers come look at it. Good idea. Good idea. Not a good idea. And then all these good ideas just sat there. And so what this training that I built was designed to do was to teach these people, employees who had good ideas, don't just come to us with a good idea. Put together a complete proposal. Go do your research. Go talk to people. Find out, all the elements. Put together a little mini project. I mean, and it doesn't have to be some grand project plan, but, a very basic budget, a very basic project plan, very basic, who are the players that are involved in this, and and then talk to people. Have they done it before? Have we tried this before? What did you learn from that, kind of thing? And I was just like, wow, I think this is great. I think all companies should, instead of having a suggestion box, because they learn so much in that process, and it empowers people. It gives them, hey, I'm tired of working on Alcoa, believe me, had a lot of assembly line work. I'm tired of working on this assembly line. I want to do something more. I want to make it more efficient. There's a better way of doing things. And that goes back to all that creativity and problem solving and all those kind of things. We just need to give students the opportunity to do that. And you're not going to get a standardized test score for this. You just can't give standardized test scores, but you're going to get kids that are excited about learning.
Yes, because one of my favorite questions for my students is, what did you learn today that you couldn't look up on YouTube or get from ChatGPT? And teachers don't like that. When I work with teachers, I don't work a ton with teachers, but I love to ask them, what can you teach your kids today in your classroom that YouTube University couldn't have taught them while they laid in bed on their phone?
Exactly.
And a lot of people are afraid to ask that question. And I go, not only should you know the answer, but then you should then go there to what it can't do or it's not good at yet, like the creativity. I've never had ChatGPT do anything for me I didn't tell it to do.
Yeah.
It's not creative at all.
No.
It can execute on the task I give to varying degrees of quality, largely based on my input, but it never nudges me on my phone and says, I had a great idea. I know you didn't ask me to do this, but what if? It doesn't work that way. And that's how you'd want your employees. If you saw an inefficiency in a system, wouldn't a good manager want to know? If a student had a great idea of how to do something better or differently, wouldn't a good teacher want to know?
Exactly. And it's funny because this isn't exactly what you're talking about, but I don't know if you've ever used a tool called Poe.
I have. It has all the different
Hmm?
chat bots on the side that you can use.
Yeah. And the reason I first started, I liked it when I first started using it. I was writing a whole script, a whole podcast thing on the Salem witch trials. And I would write a piece about it, and then it would give me a whole bunch of questions that I had never thought about, you know? And I was like, oh, I wouldn't have thought about that. So I'll ask this question, and then I'll ask this question. So it not only gives you, because there are, I think Claude, when it comes to writing, is way better than ChatGPT. So a lot of times I'll use Claude or I'll have it give me a different, version than ChatGPT will give me or whatever. But basically, when you learn to start building, and I don't think Poe is an agent, it's not an agent, it's not an AI agent, but it kind of, to me, that starts my creative juices thinking in a direction that I wouldn't have thought had I not have used that tool. If I would have just given Chat GPT here, write this for me, make it sound scary, bring out this aspect and this aspect, it's going to do exactly what I told it to. Where Poe is going to go, okay, now I gave you that, here's some other things to think about.
Yeah. And one of my favorite prompting strategies that I teach my students is ask it, what else do you need to know before you go do this thing?
Mhm.
I just did that yesterday with this long detailed prompt. And I thought, look at me. I gave it such a detailed prompt. And I thought, well, I call it what else? So what else the prompt? And I said, and what else would you need to know to do this well? And it asked me three questions that I saw. And I go, wow, those are really important things that I did not address
Mhm.
that before I get this sloppy output, I would want to put in and say, and this too. Now go do it. And again, it also makes me think, how often do I do that with my students? How often do I do that with my kids where I think I'm giving them really clear instructions, but I don't ask, what else do you need to know to do this well?
Yeah.
And then they tell you and you go, I can't believe I left that out.
Yeah. So I think, in summary, I'm very hopeful for the future, even with AI, but I don't know if or how or when the school system is going to adapt. I love it when I talk to teachers like you who are like all in on this and just, it's like, hey, I want to prepare my kids for the future. And I want them to be creative. I want them to, to dream big. I think when we first talked, I mentioned this, but I'm not sure. When my kids were young, very young, before they started school, all my friends were sending their kids to preschool and, oh, we got to pick the best preschool so that, they who teaches the best ABCs and one, two, threes and, all these things before they even go to school. And I'm like, isn't that why we're sending them to school? Why are, and I chose a different route. I said, if I can teach my kids to love learning, they'll do fine in school. And they did. My older three, my younger son had some learning disabilities, and we had to get really creative sometimes at how we approached learning with him. But even to this day, and it's taken a long time because learning was a really hard thing for him. But he's finally getting it, and he's wanting to learn, and he's, learning to enjoy the process of learning. And I think that if we can just somehow instill in kids a love of learning, that they'll figure all the rest of this out.
Absolutely. Because all the content is going to change anyways. If
Mhm.
you're if you have a crew of fifth graders and you're teaching them, let's say, history or science, by the time they get out and go to college or their first job, we're going to know different and better ways. And there'll be new tools that weren't even around. There'll be jobs that your fifth grade student is going to have that didn't exist when they were in fifth grade.
Mhm.
So maybe learning to love the process and be resilient and work together in teams throughout it is one of the things that definitely will carry over no matter what they do and no matter what new thing comes out.
Yep, I don't think learning will ever become outdated.
And it's only becoming more and more important. Who hasn't had to change because of AI? I haven't met anyone who says my field is completely unaffected. I didn't have to update my skills or learn anything new. I do it the same as I ever did. I haven't met anyone.
Yeah, well, my son's an electrician, and you'd think, okay, in the vocational realm, they don't use AI, but they do.
Yeah. I have a friend who just built an AI voice agent workflow for an electrician so
Hmm.
that when people cold call, he doesn't have to be, up on a ladder and then answer his phone and listen to their call. He has an AI agent that takes down their info, gets, their issue, and then puts it on a spreadsheet for him to call back.
Hmm.
And I know like inventory, I'm sure a lot of electricians that have a warehouse use some kind of inventory management software that has AI built in. It can tell you what you need to order or even automate that before you realize you're running out of a part.
Yep, and it's even getting to where it can, use schematics and, design. I don't know enough about electricity, but, put together all those diagrams that show you how to wire things. So it's an exciting and time, and I think if we embrace it instead of, shying away from it, I think, and teaching kids to be excited about using it and being excited about creating their own vision for using it is
Yes.
important.
And my sales pitch to my students, I had this discussion today. If you don't learn how to use it and make it work for you, someone else will use it on you and you'll work for them or be controlled by it. That's my biggest motivation. You'll either produce something with it or you'll be a slave to consuming from it. And I know which side of that coin I'd rather be on and what I hope my students choose as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for your time today.
Yes, thank you for having me on, Cheryl. Like all of our conversations, I've enjoyed it and see even more correlation to what both of us do every time we talk.
I know. Well, thank you so much.